While I was having dinner at my daughter's house, my neighbor called me with a scared voice. "Are you home?" "No," I said. "Then who is walking around your house right now?" she whispered. When I tried to leave my daughter's house to check on my home, my daughter stopped me and laughed loudly. You won't believe what she was hiding. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Janice Henry from Detroit. Thank you for being part of our family. No, let me tell you everything. The kitchen timer went off with a loud beep. The sound made me jump and drop my water glass. Sarah rushed in from the living room without knocking on the kitchen door. Her fancy dress was wrinkled like she had been running. Her eyes looked around the room like a scared cat. Her hands were shaking as she played with her purse that she had owned for many years. "Mom, I need help with money." The words came out before she could catch her breath. $15,000 tonight. I put down my half-full glass next to the papers on the kitchen table. I kept my old hands still even though I was shocked. The light from the window behind me made long shadows on her messy face. Her shirt was not tucked in right and there were dark circles under her eyes that were not there last week. $15,000. I crossed my arms over my chest and felt disappointed in my stomach. "What kind of trouble are you in now, sweetie?" Sarah started walking back and forth. Her high heels made clicking sounds on the kitchen floor. She could not sit still or look at me. Her hand hit the wooden table making the pepper shaker jump. "It's hard to explain, Mom. Some business thing went wrong and I need to fix it fast." "Business thing?" I kept my voice calm but my jaw got tight. "Or shopping debt?" Her face turned red and she spun around to face me, standing in front of the kitchen door. "It's not your business what it is. I just need the money and I know you have it from selling Grandma's jewelry." "The jewelry?" 3 generations of family treasures sold last year to help pay for my medicine. The money was supposed to help me live comfortably, not disappear because my 35-year-old daughter could not control her spending. "Sarah." I moved closer to her and saw how her hands shook when she thought I was not looking. "How much do you owe them?" "Them?" Her voice cracked. "I don't know what you mean. The people who have you this scared. The ones who sent you here at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night looking like you have not slept in days." She ran her fingers through her messy hair making it stick up funny. "Mom, please. You don't understand. These are not the kind of people who wait for payment plans." I had heard this speech before. Last year it was $8,000 for a sure-thing investment. The year before it was $5,000 for credit card debt. Each time Sarah promised it would be the last time. That she had learned her lesson. That she was done with spending too much money forever. "No, daughter." I made my shoulders straight and looked her in the eye. "Not this time." Her face went white then red again. "What do you mean not this time? I'm your daughter." "Which is exactly why I'm saying no." I walked to the sink and turned my back on her. "Every dollar I give you goes to some store or credit card. I won't help this bad habit anymore." "Help." The word came from her lips like a bad word. "I'm asking my mother for help and you call it a bad habit?" "I call it what it is." I turned around and held the counter edge. "You're 35 years old, Sarah. When are you going to stop running to mommy every time you mess up your life?" She stared at me for a long time, breathing fast. Then something cold came into her look that I had never seen in my daughter's face before. "You'll be sorry, old woman." Her voice was quiet but the mean sound in it made my blood feel cold. "You think you're so smart sitting on all that jewelry money while your own daughter is in trouble? Well, maybe it's time someone taught you what real trouble looks like." Before I could answer, she turned and walked to the door. Her heels were loud on the floor. The door slammed behind her and through the window I watched her get in her red car. The car engine started with a sound that shook the kitchen windows. I stood in the doorway watching her car lights disappear down the street that led to town. The quiet felt heavy with only the sound of crickets and the old house settling around me. I spent the weekend staying away from the kitchen where Saturday's fight had happened. I kept busy with cleaning and small jobs around the house. Every time I walked past that doorway, I could still hear Sarah's voice. "You'll be sorry, old woman." The mean words echoed in my mind as I dusted furniture and checked the door locks twice, trying not to think about the cold look in my daughter's eyes. Monday morning found me in my favorite chair in the living room drinking tea that was getting cold on the side table. The old telephone on its wooden stand started ringing at exactly 9:30. Its loud sound cut through the quiet house like a knife. "Hello, Mom." Sarah's voice sounded different, warmer, almost happy. The harsh sound from Saturday night was gone. It reminded me of the girl she used to be. "Hey, I wanted to call and say sorry for the other night. I was way out of line." I paused and raised my eyebrows. In 35 years, Sarah had never called to say sorry for anything without me asking first. I held the phone tighter. "Really? This is surprising." I know." She laughed, but it sounded fake, like she was reading from a paper. "I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right. I can't keep coming to you every time I mess up. It's not fair to you." I looked at the family photos on the shelf, pictures of Sarah as a child when her biggest worry was catching butterflies in the backyard. Those days felt like a long time ago. "We've been through this many times, sweetie. This time will be different, I promise." Her voice sounded almost real. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Mike and I want you to come for dinner Wednesday night. He's making that chicken you like with the little potatoes. We thought it would be nice to spend time together as a family." Mike's chicken was very good, and I found myself thinking about saying yes, even though I should be careful. Maybe her husband was finally helping her be better. He had always been the calm one in their marriage, the one who thought before acting when Sarah got too excited. "Wednesday night," I said, reaching for a pen from the drawer. "What time?" 6 o'clock. We're at 248 Oak Avenue now. We moved last month. Remember I told you about the new place? She had not told me about any new place, but I did not correct her. "It's the yellow house with the green door right next to the park." I wrote the address on a napkin and noticed how fast she said the details. Most people pause when giving directions to their own home, thinking about the way or checking house numbers in their mind. Sarah spoke like she was reading from a piece of paper. "Mike is really excited about having you over," she continued. "He keeps talking about how we need to be a real family again. You know how he is about family dinners and traditions." That was true. Mike had always been the one to plan holiday parties and birthday celebrations, usually when Sarah said such things were too much work. It was one of the things I really liked about my son-in-law. "Well," I said slowly, staring at the address I had written, "I suppose I could come by." "Great, that's just great, Mom. We'll see you Wednesday at 6. And Mom, thanks for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful." The phone went quiet before I could answer. I sat there holding the phone, listening to the empty sound, and staring at the napkin in my other hand. Something about our talk felt practiced, like Sarah had said every word before calling me. But then again, maybe that was not such a bad thing. Maybe she had finally learned she needed to put real work into fixing our relationship. Maybe Mike had talked her into swallowing her pride and making things right. I hung up the phone and looked at the address again. 248 Oak Avenue. The paper felt light in my fingers, but somehow the weight of the choice pressed down on my chest like a rock. The evening news played softly in the background as I picked at my dinner. Sarah's invitation was on my mind like a heavy weight. Every few minutes my eyes went to the napkin on the coffee table where I had written the address. 248 Oak Avenue. Even after I had turned off the television and walked through the house checking locks with more care than usual, those numbers followed me. By 9 o'clock I found myself lying on my bed, fully dressed except for my shoes, staring at the ceiling fan as it made moving shadows on the walls. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed green in the darkness. 9:47, then 10:23, then 10:58. Sleep would not come. Every time I closed my eyes I saw Sarah's face from Saturday night. Not the sorry voice from today's phone call, but the cold stranger who had threatened me in my own kitchen. The daughter I had raised would never have looked at me that way. But then again, the daughter I had raised would not have needed $15,000 from dangerous people either. I thought about the last time Sarah had called me from a shopping mall at midnight. Her words unclear from whatever she had been drinking. "Mom, I need a ride home. My car won't start." When I had arrived, I had found her walking around the parking lot with her wallet empty and her pride nowhere to be found. She had slept in my passenger seat the whole drive home, snoring like the little girl who used to fall asleep during long car trips to visit her grandpa. The girl who had spent summer afternoons in my kitchen handing me ingredients and asking endless questions about cooking and baking. The teenager who had proudly shown me her first paycheck from the flower shop. The young woman who had promised to make something of herself, to be better than the small-town life she had inherited. When had that girl disappeared? When had shopping become more important than family, more important than self-respect? I got up and walked to the window, looking down at the street where Sarah's car had driven away 3 nights ago. The road was empty now, lit only by the single street light at the corner. Somewhere out there my daughter was planning something. I could feel it in my bones the way I used to sense storms coming across the fields. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe today's phone call had been real. Maybe Mike really had talked her into changing, into making an effort at rebuilding what we had lost. He was a good man, steady and practical in ways that Sarah had never learned to be. If anyone could straighten her out, it would be him. I went back to the bed and picked up the framed photo from my nightstand. Sarah at age 10, smiling with missing teeth next to the dollhouse we had built together in the garage. Her hands were dirty with paint and her eyes sparkled with the pure joy of creating something. That girl had believed anything was possible if you worked hard enough for it. Maybe some part of that girl still lived inside her. Maybe Wednesday night's dinner would be the first step toward finding her again. The clock read 11:34 when I finally felt my eyelids getting heavy. I held the photo against my chest and let myself drift toward sleep, though an uncomfortable feeling I could not quite name continued to bother the edges of my mind. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. For now I had to try to trust that my daughter still lived somewhere inside the desperate woman who had stood in my kitchen demanding money. Sometimes you have to try. Sometimes trust is all a mother has left. Tuesday morning found me standing at the kitchen sink with my teacup staring out at the street through the window above the sink. Sleep had been hard to find after Monday night's phone call. My mind kept going between hope and doubt like a broken record. Sarah's voice had sounded so different, so honest. But 35 years of watching my daughter had taught me to tell the difference between real sorry and fake performance. The strange car caught my attention right away. It sat parked where no car usually belonged, across from Mrs. Peterson's mailbox, positioned with a clear view of my driveway. The morning dew still covered its windshield, suggesting it had been there all night. I noticed it yesterday evening when I had stepped out to bring in the trash cans but thought it belonged to someone visiting the neighborhood. Through the driver's side window I could see a person hunched over the steering wheel. The woman's fingers tapped nervously on the dashboard, and every few seconds she would look up and down the street as if checking for something or someone. I put my tea down and walked outside. My slippers made soft sounds on the concrete driveway. The morning air was cool, filled with the sounds of birds and the distant noise of traffic on the highway. As I got closer to the car I could see the woman more clearly. She was young with blonde hair and the kind of tired look that suggested she spent most of her time worried. I knocked gently on the driver's window and waited as the woman jumped and rolled down the glass. Her eyes were red and there was a nervous energy about her that reminded me of a mouse caught in a corner. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice friendly and neighborly. "Everything okay? I noticed you've been parked here since yesterday." "Oh yes ma'am, everything's fine." The woman's voice was higher than seemed natural, and she would not look at me directly. "Just having some car trouble, waiting for it to cool down before I try starting her up again." I looked at the car's license plates, which seemed odd for someone having car trouble in our neighborhood. "Car trouble," said. "I've got some experience with cars if you need help. Spent many years helping my late husband work on everything from tractors to pickup trucks." No, that's very kind of you, but I think it's more of a battery issue. Or maybe the starter. She mixed up her explanation, saying different things before the words were fully out of her mouth. I've got a friend coming to look at it later. The tools I could see in the car suggested she might actually know something about fixing cars, but her nervous behavior told a different story. I could see her gripping the steering wheel tighter as our conversation continued, knuckles white against the worn plastic. Well, if you change your mind, I'm right across the street. Name's Margaret Foster. I pointed toward my house, noting how her eyes followed the movement with strong interest. There's a good repair shop about 3 miles down Main Street if your friend can't make it out. That's real nice of you, Mrs. Foster. Real nice. She seemed eager to end our conversation, already reaching for the window handle. I'm sure we'll get it worked out soon enough. All right then. I stepped back from the car, but something about the whole conversation felt wrong. The woman's explanation had been too detailed for someone with real car trouble, and her nervousness seemed too much for a simple car problem. You take care now. Walking back toward my house, I found myself looking over my shoulder at the car one more time. The woman had already rolled up her window and was back to tapping her fingers on the dashboard, occasionally looking at my house with what looked like planned interest rather than casual looking. I finished my tea standing by the kitchen window watching the car and trying to shake the feeling that I had just been lied to by a complete stranger. The license plate number stuck in my mind. ABC 5678, though I could not say exactly why I felt it might be important to remember. By noon, when I went out to check the mail, the car was gone. Wednesday arrived with the kind of spring weather that made everything seem possible. I had spent most of the day going between excitement and worry. The car incident from yesterday morning faded to a background concern as evening got closer. Sarah's dinner invitation had filled my thoughts, and despite my worries, I found myself really hoping this might be the beginning of something better between us. At 5 o'clock, I began getting ready for the evening. My navy blue dress came out of the closet, slightly worn at the hem but still nice enough for a family dinner. I polished my black shoes until they reflected the bedroom light, chose a simple necklace, and checked my purse to make sure I had enough money should the evening call for it. From my small collection in the cabinet, I chose a bottle of sparkling juice that had been waiting for a special occasion. The mirror showed a woman trying to look her best for her daughter, and the sight both pleased and made me sad. How long had it been since we had shared a meal without tension? How many years since Sarah had invited me anywhere without needing something in return? Stepping outside at 5:30, I nearly bumped into Betty Williams, who was watering the flower bed that bordered our yards. Her kind face broke into a smile when she saw my nice outfit. Well, now don't you look lovely this evening, Margaret? Special occasion. Sarah invited me to dinner. I held up the juice bottle with what I hoped was casual confidence. First time in quite a while that we've done something like this. Betty's expression softened with real warmth. That's wonderful news. Family's the most important thing we've got, especially at our age. I'm glad to hear you two are working things out. We'll see how it goes. I appreciated her optimism even if I could not fully share it. You know how these things can be. I do indeed. She turned off her garden hose and leaned against the fence post. But sometimes all it takes is someone reaching out first. Sounds like Sarah's trying to do that. The drive to Sarah's neighborhood took me through the familiar streets of Millbrook. Across the bridge that crossed the small creek the town was named for. I had driven these roads countless times over the years, but tonight they seemed different somehow, like I was traveling towards something important rather than simply going from one place to another. Sarah's new address led me into a subdivision I rarely visited, where the houses were newer and the lawns more perfect than in my older neighborhood. The homes here suggested a level of wealth that surprised me given Sarah's recent money troubles. How was she affording a place like this? 248 Oak Avenue turned out to be a yellow house with a green door, exactly as Sarah had described. The lawn was neatly cut and warm light glowed from the windows, creating the picture of home happiness. I parked behind a blue truck that I assumed belonged to Mike, taking a moment to check my appearance in the rearview mirror. The juice bottle felt heavier in my hand as I walked up the front path. Through the large picture window I could see movement inside, people getting ready for my arrival. The porch light came on as I got close to the door, and I realized Sarah must have been watching for me. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the doorbell and waited. This was it. The moment when we would discover whether my daughter's invitation had been real or just another performance in a long series of disappointments. The sound of footsteps came from inside, quick and eager. The door opened before the bell had finished ringing. Sarah's smile was so wide it looked painful, stretching across her face with a strength that immediately put me on guard. Before I could fully step onto the porch, she had pulled the door open completely and was reaching forward to hug me with both arms. "Mom, you made it right on time, just like always." Her voice carried that same fake cheerful tone from Monday's phone call, higher than her normal speaking voice. Come in, come in. Mike's been cooking all afternoon." Mike appeared beside her almost instantly, as if he had been waiting just inside the doorway. His hands moved nervously as he reached for the juice bottle, and I noticed they shook slightly when he took it from me. "Mrs. Foster, it's so good to see you. This is such beautiful juice. You really didn't need to bring anything, but it's so thoughtful." The words tumbled out of his mouth in a breathless rush, and he held the bottle against his chest like a shield. The inside of the house struck me immediately as too prepared. Every surface gleamed with fresh cleaning, and I could smell the leftover scent of cleaning spray mixed with cooking smells. Fresh flowers sat in a glass vase on the coffee table, expensive-looking roses that seemed out of place in Sarah's typically casual lifestyle. "Let me take your sweater, Mom." Sarah was already behind me, helping me out of my cardigan with the kind of helpful service I had never experienced from her before. "You look great, really nice. That necklace brings out your eyes." The dining room had been changed into something like a magazine photograph. China plates I had never seen before were arranged with perfect precision, surrounded by silverware that caught the light from multiple candles scattered across the table. The overall effect was beautiful, but it felt more like a movie set than a family dinner. "Sarah tells me you haven't seen the house since we moved in," Mike said, leading me toward the dining area. "We've done so much work on it. Sarah's been incredibly helpful with all the improvements." I followed him, noticing how he would not look directly at me while speaking. His movements were quick and efficient, but there was underlying tension in the way he held his shoulders, as if he was getting ready for something. The meal itself was impressive. Perfectly cooked chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, and green beans that were still crisp. Everything was served on those strange china plates, and Sarah made a show of opening my juice with a bottle opener that looked like it had been bought specifically for the occasion. "A toast," Sarah announced, raising her glass with dramatic flair. "To second chances and family, to putting the past behind us and moving forward together." The juice was good, but I found myself studying my daughter's face as she drank. Her eyes kept going to her watch, quick looks that she probably thought I would not notice. Each time she checked the time, her smile seemed to get tighter around the edges. "Tell me about your work, Sarah." I cut into my chicken, which was cooked exactly how I liked it. "Things going better for you lately?" "Much better, Mom. Much better." She started talking about vague job descriptions and new opportunities that sounded rehearsed and completely lacking in details. I've really turned things around. Mike can tell you. I'm a different person now. Mike nodded enthusiastically, but his smile looked forced. She's been working so hard, really dedicated to making positive changes. His hands were busy throughout the conversation, constantly serving more food, refilling water glasses, and adjusting napkins that did not need adjusting. The conversation felt planned, with both Sarah and Mike steering away from any topics that might lead to uncomfortable territory. When I asked about their money or Sarah's specific job, the answers became even more evasive, filled with general statements and quick subject changes. Remember when you taught me to make cookies in that old kitchen? Sarah's laugh sounded forced as she started talking about a carefully chosen childhood memory. I must have spilled more flour on the floor than actually made it into the bowl. These shared memories felt different from natural family remembering, too polished, too deliberately chosen to present Sarah in the most favorable light possible. It was as if she had prepared a mental list of safe, positive memories to use whenever the conversation threatened to go toward recent difficulties. Throughout the meal, I became increasingly aware that I was watching a performance rather than participating in genuine family time. Both Sarah and Mike seemed to be working from a script, hitting predetermined emotional beats with the precision of actors who had rehearsed their roles extensively. My phone rang as we were finishing the main course, its sharp tone cutting through Sarah's story about potential business expansion opportunities. Both Sarah and Mike froze for a tiny second before Sarah's expression shifted to forced casualness. "Go ahead and answer it, Mom. Don't mind us." But as I reached for the phone, I caught something in Sarah's eyes. A flash of real panic that she could not quite hide behind her practiced smile. My phone's sharp ring sliced through the dinner conversation like a knife through butter. Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, and Mike's hands froze while reaching for the juice bottle. The sudden silence felt heavy, broken only by the continued ringing that seemed louder with each sound. "Sorry, let me just check who this is." I reached into my purse, feeling the vibration against my fingers. The caller ID showed Betty Williams, and I felt a small surge of warmth seeing my neighbor's name. "Go ahead and answer it, Mom. Don't mind us." Sarah's voice carried that same artificial cheerfulness from earlier. But I caught something else underneath, a tightness that had not been there moments before. "Betty, what can I do for you?" I stepped slightly away from the table, phone pressed to my ear, trying to maintain dinner manners while Sarah and Mike watched with expressions that seemed too carefully composed. "Margaret, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Betty's familiar voice came through clearly, tinged with concern. "I was just wondering, are you home tonight? I thought I saw your car in the driveway earlier, but now I'm not so sure." "No, I'm actually at Sarah's place for dinner." "Why? Is everything okay?" The words felt strange in my mouth, and I noticed Sarah gripping her juice glass tighter, knuckles whitening against the glass. There was a pause on Betty's end, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a note of alarm that made my stomach clench. "Margaret, there are lights moving around inside your house. Not normal lights, flashlight beams like someone searching through rooms. I've been watching for about 15 minutes now." The fork slipped from Sarah's fingers, clattering against her plate with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet dining room. Mike's face had gone pale, and he was clutching the juice bottle like an anchor. "What do you mean, lights moving around?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears, as if someone else was speaking the words. "Are you certain?" "Dead certain. I was out checking my flower garden when I noticed them. First in your living room, then the kitchen, now they're upstairs. Whoever it is, they're being careful about it. Should I call the police?" The room around me seemed to tilt slightly, and I felt my free hand instinctively reach for my car keys in my purse. "Yes, call the police. I'm coming home right now. Be careful, Margaret. I don't know if they're still inside or not. I'll keep watching from my window until you get here." I ended the call and looked up to find Sarah and Mike staring at me with expressions that would have been funny under different circumstances. Sarah's mouth hung slightly open, and Mike was still holding dishes he had been clearing, frozen like a statue. "Someone's in my house," I announced, already moving toward where I had left my sweater. "I need to get home right now." Sarah's response came too quickly, Her laughter pitched too high and too loud for the small dining room. "Oh, come on, Mom. Old Betty's probably just seeing tree shadows or something. You know how she gets, always thinking she's still working security from her old job." The dismissive tone in my daughter's voice struck me wrong, especially coming so fast after Betty's worried call. I paused in putting on my sweater, studying Sarah's face in the flickering candlelight. Her smile looked strained, and there was something desperate in her eyes. "Betty's not confused, Sarah. She knows the difference between shadows and flashlight beams moving through a house." I pulled my sweater on, fully checking that my keys were secure. "Someone's robbing my home while I'm sitting here eating dinner. Mom, please." Mike's voice was barely above a whisper, and his hands were trembling as he set down the dishes he had been holding. Maybe there's some explanation. But I was already moving toward the front door, my mind racing with thoughts of what might be happening to my belongings, my memories, everything I had worked for over the years. The timing felt wrong, too convenient. But I pushed that thought aside in favor of getting home to assess the situation. Sarah rose from her chair so quickly it nearly fell backward, her face shifting from fake concern to something that looked almost like panic. Sarah's movement to block my path was swift but clumsy, her desperation finally breaking through the careful act she had maintained all evening. Her hands came up in what might have been meant as a casual gesture, but her body language screamed panic. "Whoa, hold on there, Mom. You're getting all worked up over nothing." Her laughter rang false in the small space, echoing off the walls with an edge of hysteria. "Betty's 70 years old. The woman probably can't see her own hand in front of her face at night." I stopped moving toward the door, not because Sarah's words made sense, but because something in her tone reminded me of the girl who used to lie about broken dishes and missing candy. The same two eager explanations. The same desperate need to be believed despite obvious evidence to the contrary. "Sarah, move aside." Kept my voice level but firm. "Betty's eyesight is fine, and she's not the type to call about shadows. Someone is in my house. Look, okay, maybe she did see something." Sarah repositioned herself more squarely between me and the door, her hands now openly placed on my shoulders in a gesture that felt more restraining than comforting. "But think about it logically. If someone was really robbing houses, wouldn't they pick a time when people aren't having dinner? Wouldn't they watch the place first to make sure nobody's around?" The words hit me strangely, too specific and knowledgeable for someone trying to reassure a worried mother. I looked up at my daughter's face and saw something I had never seen before. The cold calculation of someone who knew exactly what was happening and was desperate to prevent me from discovering it. "How do you know they didn't watch the place?" The question came out before I could stop it, and I watched Sarah's expression flicker with something that might have been fear. "I don't. That's what criminals do, right? They plan these things out." Her grip on my shoulders tightened, and I realized she was physically preventing me from moving forward. "Mom, please, let's just finish dinner and then drive over together. I'll come with you to check everything out." Behind Sarah, Mike had gone completely still, a dish towel clutched in his white-knuckled hands. When our eyes met, he looked away immediately, but not before I caught the guilt written across his features as clearly as if he had confessed aloud. "Get out of my way, daughter." The words came out harder than I had intended, carrying decades of parental authority that Sarah had always responded to as a child. "I'm going to check on my house now." "Mom, you're being unreasonable. Think about this rationally." "Rationally?" I stepped closer to her, close enough to see the sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool evening air. Rationally would be trusting my neighbor's word over the protests of a daughter who's lied to me more times than I can count. Sarah's face flushed red, and for a moment I thought she might actually hit me. Instead, she moved even more directly into my path, using her size advantage to create a wall between me and the exit. "You're not going anywhere until we talk this through properly." Her voice had dropped to a tone I had never heard from her before. Cold, threatening, nothing like the desperate girl who had sat in my kitchen 5 days ago begging for money. Sarah Elizabeth Foster. I used her full name the way I had when she was a child and had crossed a line that demanded immediate correction. "You will step aside and let me leave this house right now. Or what? You'll call the cops on your own daughter." She was breathing heavily, and I could smell the juice on her breath mixed with something that might have been fear. "You'll destroy our family over some old woman's paranoid fantasies." But even as she spoke, I saw her eyes dart to the front door, then to her watch, then to Mike. The pattern was too specific to be casual anxiety. She was tracking time, measuring it against something else, something that required me to stay exactly where I was for a predetermined period. "It's not paranoid if someone's actually in my house, Sarah." I took a step forward, testing her resolve. "And if you don't let me pass, I'm going to start wondering why my own daughter is so determined to keep me away from home on the exact night someone decides to rob it." The accusation hung in the air between us like poison gas. And I watched my daughter's face go through a series of tiny expressions. Shock, guilt, anger, and finally a desperate sort of resignation that told me everything I needed to know. Sarah's hand shot forward and twisted the door lock with a sharp metallic click that echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. The sound seemed to hang in the air between us, final and unmistakable in its meaning. She put the key in her pocket with deliberate slowness, her eyes never leaving mine. "You're not leaving, Mom. Not until we figure this out." The simple statement carried more menace than any threat she could have made. I stared at my daughter, this stranger wearing Sarah's face, and felt something cold settle in my chest. The girl I had raised was gone, replaced by someone capable of locking her own mother in a house while accomplices ransacked the family home. "Sarah!" My voice was steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Unlock that door right now." "I can't do that." She leaned back against the door, arms crossed, no longer bothering to maintain even the pretense of concern. "Not until you calm down and listen to reason." Behind her, Mike had pressed himself against the dining room wall, the dish towel still clutched in his hands. His face showed the kind of horror that comes from watching someone you thought you knew transform into someone unrecognizable. "Listen to reason." I kept my voice calm, though every instinct screamed at me to force my way past her. "Daughter, you just locked me in your house against my will while someone robs mine. What possible reason could justify that? You don't understand the situation you're in." Sarah's tone carried a warning that made my skin crawl. "There are people involved in this that you don't want to cross. People who don't forgive debts or accept excuses." The admission hit me like a physical blow. Not just that Sarah had planned this, but that she was willing to sacrifice her own mother to solve problems she had created through her spending addiction. I thought about the $15,000 she demanded, about the cold look in her eyes when I had refused, about her promise that I would regret my decision. "I need to use the bathroom," I said quietly. Sarah's expression shifted to suspicion, but basic human decency, or perhaps the last remnants of her upbringing, prevented her from refusing outright. "Fine, but don't try anything stupid." The bathroom was at the back of the house, and I knew from previous visits that it had a window facing the backyard. As I closed the door behind me, I could hear Sarah and Mike talking in hushed, urgent voices in the hallway. Their words were unclear, but the tone was pure panic. The window was older than I had remembered, with a simple latch that opened easily despite years of paint buildup. The screen came away with minimal noise, and I found myself looking down at a drop of perhaps 5 feet into Mike's vegetable garden. Not ideal for a 65-year-old woman, but manageable if I was careful. Getting through the window required more flexibility than I had possessed in years, but desperation provided both motivation and strength. I landed heavily in the soft earth of the garden, dirt staining my dinner clothes and small branches catching at my sweater. The impact sent a shock through my knees, but nothing felt broken. Behind me I could hear Sarah's voice getting louder, more agitated. How long before she realized what had happened? How long before she discovered the open window and empty bathroom? My car sat in the driveway where I had left it, keys still in my purse. The engine turned over smoothly, and I backed out of the driveway with careful precision, not wanting to alert the neighbors to anything unusual. It was not until I was several blocks away that I allowed myself to fully process what had just occurred. My own daughter had betrayed me. Not just refused to help, not just lied or manipulated, but actively orchestrated a crime against me while pretending to offer reconciliation. The dinner, the apologies, Mike's nervousness, all of it had been theater designed to keep me away from my house while it was being robbed. The drive back to my neighborhood passed in a blur of familiar streets and unfamiliar emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a deep sadness that felt like grief for the daughter I thought I knew. But underneath all of that was something else. A cold determination that Sarah had inherited from me, along with her father's eyes and my stubborn streak. She had made a mistake in letting me discover her plan, an even bigger mistake in underestimating what her old mother was capable of when pushed too far. I had spent 40 years working with my hands, solving problems, and dealing with difficult people. My daughter was about to learn that some lessons come too late to do any good. As I turned onto my street, I could see police lights flashing in the distance, red and blue reflections dancing off the windows of neighboring houses. Betty had kept her word and called the authorities. Now I needed to get home and find out exactly what my daughter and her accomplice had stolen from me. More importantly, I needed to decide what I was going to do about it. Red and blue lights painted my street in alternating colors as I turned the corner, my heart sinking as I realized the police cars were clustered directly in front of my house. The scene looked like something from a television drama. Multiple patrol vehicles, officers moving with purpose, and neighbors gathered at respectful distances, their faces reflecting the kind of curious interest that comes with unexpected neighborhood excitement. I parked quickly behind the last police car and hurried toward my front door where Officer Lisa Chan was coordinating what appeared to be the tail end of an investigation. Through the rear window of one patrol car I could see a slumped figure in handcuffs, head down in the universal posture of defeat. Mrs. Foster. Officer Chan approached me with the kind of professional calm that suggested she had been expecting my arrival. "I'm glad you're here. We've got your burglar in custody, and your neighbor, Mrs. Williams, has been extremely helpful in providing details about the incident." Betty was right. The words came out as relief rather than surprise. I looked toward Betty's house and saw her standing by her fence, arms crossed with the satisfied expression of a woman whose instincts had been vindicated. Someone really was in my house. "Yes, ma'am, they were. We apprehended the suspect in your bedroom, attempting to access what appears to be a jewelry box. She's confessed to breaking and entering, and she's also provided some additional information that I think you'll find disturbing." Officer Chen guided me toward the patrol car where the burglar sat hunched in the back seat. Through the window I could see a thin, young woman in her 20s, the same nervous individual I had spoken to yesterday morning when she had been sitting in that car across from Mrs. Peterson's mailbox. "Her name is Jessica Martinez. Ring any bells?" "I spoke to her yesterday. She claimed to have car trouble." The memory felt surreal now, knowing I had offered help to someone who was planning to rob me. She seemed nervous, but I thought she was just stressed about her car. According to Miss Martinez, she was hired to commit this burglary. She's been very forthcoming about the details, probably hoping for a reduced sentence. Officer Chen's expression grew more serious. "Mrs. Foster, she claims your daughter Sarah arranged this entire operation." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though some part of me had been expecting them since the moment I had realized Sarah was preventing me from leaving her house. Hearing it confirmed by law enforcement made it undeniably real. Sarah hired her to rob my house while I was at dinner. The statement came out flat, emotionless, as my mind struggled to process the full extent of my daughter's betrayal. "That's what she's telling us. Says Sarah promised her $3,000 to get into your jewelry box and retrieve $15,000 in cash." When we arrested her, she immediately started talking about how Sarah had set up the dinner invitation specifically to keep you away from the house during the burglary. I walked closer to the patrol car and looked directly at Jessica Martinez. When she finally raised her eyes to meet mine, I saw shame and fear but no real remorse. This was a woman who had been caught, not one who regretted her actions. "Did you get into the jewelry box?" I asked Officer Chen, though I was still staring at the burglar. "No, ma'am. Your bedroom door was locked, and by the time she got it open, Mrs. Williams had already called us. She fled back downstairs when she heard our sirens, but we had the house surrounded. The jewelry box shows tool marks where she attempted to force it, but it held secure. We walked down to my bedroom where I could see the evidence of Jessica's failed attempt. My old wooden jewelry box, given to me by my mother 30 years ago, stood intact despite obvious signs of tampering. Tools were scattered around it, a small crowbar, screwdrivers, what looked like a tiny drill. Evidence of desperation rather than professional expertise. "Everything appears to be undisturbed," Officer Chan said, making notes on a clipboard. "But we'll need you to check thoroughly once we've finished processing the scene." Back outside, Betty approached with the measured stride of a woman who had been proven absolutely right about something important. Her handshake was firm, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of a job well done. "I told you that car looked suspicious," she said, allowing herself a small smile. "Been watching that Martinez woman since Tuesday morning. Something about her just did not sit right. Too nervous, too interested in your house specifically. You saved my life savings, Betty. If you had not called when you did, I trailed off, not wanting to think about what $15,000 would have meant to my retirement security. Any neighbor would have done the same thing. But her pride was evident and well-deserved. The important thing now is making sure this does not happen again and making sure everyone involved faces appropriate consequences." Officer Chen approached us again, her expression grave. "Mrs. Foster, we're heading to your daughter's house now to place her under arrest. Given Miss Martinez's confession and the evidence we've gathered, we have enough for charges of conspiracy to commit burglary among other things. I need to ask, do you want to press full charges against your daughter?" I looked back at my house, thinking about the violation of trust, the elaborate deception, the cold calculation required to rob your own mother. Then I looked at Betty, who had risked her own safety to protect me and my property. Yes, the word came out hard and final. I want full charges pressed against Sarah Foster and against anyone else involved in this conspiracy. The drive to Sarah's neighborhood felt different this time. Not the hopeful journey of a mother seeking reconciliation, but the grim procession of justice finally catching up with deception. I followed the police convoy at a respectful distance, watching the red and blue lights reflect off house windows as we moved through the quiet streets of Millbrook. Sarah's house was blazing with lights when we arrived. Every window illuminated, as if she was trying to push back the darkness that was closing in around her. Through the large picture window I could see frantic movement. Sarah pacing like a caged animal, Mike moving between rooms with what looked like suitcases in his hands. Officer Chen positioned her units strategically around the house, professional and methodical in creating a perimeter that would prevent any escape attempt. I parked across the street, close enough to witness justice but far enough to stay out of the way of police operations. The front door opened before Officer Chen could knock. Mike stood in the doorway, his face pale and drawn, looking like someone who had been crying for hours. Behind him Sarah was visible, her earlier confidence completely evaporated, replaced by the desperate expression of a woman whose careful plans had collapsed completely. "Mr. Foster, we have a warrant for your wife's arrest." Officer Chen's voice carried easily across the quiet street, professional but firm. "Is Sarah Foster inside?" "She's here." Mike's voice was barely audible, but he stepped aside to allow the officer's entry. "She's been expecting you." Sarah appeared in the doorway, no longer the manipulative daughter who had tried to charm me into compliance just hours earlier. Her shirt was rumpled, her hair disheveled, and her hands shook visibly as Officer Chen began reading her rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "This is ridiculous." Sarah's voice cracked as the handcuffs clicked into place. "You're destroying a family over some old woman's paranoid fantasies. My mother doesn't know what she's talking about." "Sarah Elizabeth Foster, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit burglary, solicitation of criminal activity, and conspiracy to commit theft." Officer Chen's tone remained professional despite Sarah's protests. "Your accomplice has provided detailed testimony about your role in planning and financing this operation." "Accomplice? What accomplice? I don't know what you're talking about." But even as Sarah denied everything, her eyes darted toward the patrol cars, and I knew she was looking for Jessica Martinez, hoping against hope that her hired burglar had not betrayed her. Mike stood in the doorway watching his wife's arrest with an expression that combined horror and resignation. When Sarah looked to him for support, he took a deliberate step backward, distancing himself both physically and emotionally from the woman he had married. "Mike, tell them this is crazy. Tell them I was with you all evening. You know I did not do anything wrong." Sarah's voice was rising to a desperate pitch. "I know you locked your mother in our house." His voice was quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I know you hired someone to rob her while you kept her away from home. I know you planned this whole thing because she would not give you money for your shopping debts." The admission hung in the air like a confession in church. Final and damning. Sarah's face went white, then red, then white again as she realized her own husband was refusing to provide her with an alibi. "You don't understand what you're doing." She struggled against the handcuffs as officers guided her toward the patrol car. "There are people involved in this that you can't protect me from. If I can't pay them back, then you should have thought of that before you tried to steal from your own mother." Mike interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "Before you turned our marriage into part of your criminal schemes." As Sarah was placed in the back of the patrol car, I could see her through the window, still talking desperately to anyone who would listen, still trying to manipulate her way out of consequences she had brought entirely upon herself. But the door closed on her protests, and suddenly the street was quiet again except for the radio chatter of police communications. Officer Chan approached my car as the convoy prepared to leave. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to finalize your statement, Mrs. Foster. But the case is solid. Between Miss Martinez's confession and Mr. Foster's corroboration, your daughter will be facing serious charges." I nodded, watching the patrol car containing Sarah disappear around the corner. 35 years of motherhood, and it had come to this. My daughter handcuffed in the back of a police car, facing prison time for trying to rob her own mother. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal as the police cars departed, porch lights dimming and curtains falling back into place. But for the Foster family, nothing would ever be normal again. 2 days had passed since the arrests, and Friday afternoon found me sitting on my front porch with Betty, sharing a quiet cup of tea and watching the neighborhood settle into its weekend rhythm. The media attention had faded. The police tape had been removed. And life in Millbrook was returning to its comfortable predictability. "Court called this morning," I told Betty, taking a sip from my cup and enjoying the simple pleasure of peaceful conversation. "Sarah got 3 years probation, full restitution, and 400 hours of community service. Judge said the family nature of the crime was an aggravating factor, not a mitigating one." Betty nodded approvingly. "Sounds about right. What about the other woman, Martinez? 18 months in county jail. Judge was not as lenient with her being a repeat offender and all." I looked across the street where the empty space in front of Mrs. Peterson's house reminded me of where this whole drama had started. Funny thing is, I almost feel sorry for Sarah. Almost. Almost counts for something, I suppose. Betty sat down her tea and leaned back in her chair. "Shows you're still her mother even after everything that happened." The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence, the kind that only comes between friends who have been through something significant together. Betty had become more than just a neighbor over the past few days. She had proven herself to be the kind of person you want living next door when trouble comes calling. "I keep thinking about that Tuesday morning," Betty said eventually. "Something about that car just bothered me, you know. Could not put my finger on it at first, but it was like watching someone case a house in broad daylight. Your instincts were spot on. If you had not been paying attention, if you had not called when you did." I shook my head, not wanting to dwell on what might have happened. "Those savings represent 40 years of work, Betty. My entire retirement fund was in that jewelry box. Well, it's still there, and that's what matters." She gestured toward my house with obvious satisfaction. "And now you know your home security is solid. That old jewelry box of your mother's proved its worth." I had spent the previous day upgrading my security system, installing motion sensors, and improving the locks on my doors and windows. Not out of paranoia, but out of practical acknowledgement that trust once broken needed to be rebuilt gradually and with appropriate precautions. Heard from Mike yesterday. I mentioned knowing Betty would be interested in the aftermath. He's filing for divorce. Said he can't be married to someone who'd victimize her own family for shopping money. Smart man. He seemed like he was caught in the middle of something he never signed up for. Betty's tone was sympathetic. "Any word on whether Sarah's getting help for her spending problem? Court-mandated counseling is part of her probation. Whether it takes or not." I shrugged, trying to balance hope with realism. "I suppose that's up to her now. I can't fix her, and I can't keep enabling her by bailing her out of trouble." The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in days I felt truly relaxed. The crisis was over. Justice had been served and life could move forward. Not the same as before. Trust once shattered leaves permanent scars, but forward nonetheless. "You know what the strangest part of all this was?" asked Betty. "That dinner on Wednesday night. Sitting there watching Sarah and Mike perform like actors in a play. Knowing something felt wrong but not being able to identify what it was. Maternal instincts," Betty said simply. "You raised that girl so you know when she's being genuine and when she's putting on an act. The problem was you wanted to believe she had changed." "Exactly. I wanted to believe it so badly that I ignored the evidence right in front of me." I finished my tea and set the empty cup on the small table between our chairs. "Won't make that mistake again. Doesn't mean you stop hoping though. Just means you hope with your eyes open." As evening approached, neighbors began emerging for their usual weekend activities. Lawn care dog walking, the general bustle of community life. Mrs. Peterson waved from her garden, and the Miller kids rode their bicycles past my house, their laughter echoing off the quiet street. This was what Sarah had tried to steal from me, I realized. Not just money, but the security that comes from knowing you can age in place surrounded by people who care about your welfare. Betty's vigilance had protected more than just my savings. It had preserved the peace of mind that makes retirement possible. "Thank you," I said to Betty, the words carrying more weight than casual conversation. "For watching out for me, for trusting your instincts, for being the kind of neighbor everyone deserves." Betty smiled, the expression mixing pride with genuine affection. "That's what neighbors do, Margaret. We watch out for each other." She gestured toward the empty street where Jessica's car had once sat. Besides, it felt good to put those old security training skills to use for something worthwhile. The sun was setting behind the houses across the street, painting everything in golden light that suggested peaceful endings and new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, but tonight I was exactly where I belonged. On my own front porch with a friend who had proven herself when it mattered most. In a neighborhood that had shown its true character when tested. Justice had been served. Community had been preserved, and trust, though modified by experience, remained possible between people who earned it honestly. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to Granny's Voice, and share your thoughts about this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.